I'm Tony Kent, and this is episode 10 of Tony Kent Writes and Chats. It is the 14th of April, which means that it's 4 days now since I last put out an episode of this particular show. There has been writing done in that time, and I have actually put out another show, which was Tony Kent Writes and Recommends, which was all about Jane Casey. So if you've not seen that, please take a look. But I've not put out a chat show because I've not had a huge amount to chat about. I have been writing. Not all weekend, it's been Easter weekend, so I took Easter Sunday off, and then yesterday, Easter Monday, I woke up with all good intentions to find about 3,000 pages of new material served by the prosecution in a murder case I'm doing in the Old Bailey in June, so I'm afraid the day job took over. But there has been writing, but it's been that structural writing again, it's been that same writing that we've spoken about a number of times. And I don't want to keep repeating myself, or I've tried to avoid, and I hope I have avoided repeating myself throughout, and I'm not going to repeat myself now. Instead, I'm going to turn to the comments page, or the comments section at the bottom of the previous broadcast, and in fact, at the bottom of episode 9. Because I've asked for questions to be asked of us, and I've said that it will hopefully make this more interactive, and it has done. And so today, I'm going to try to go about answering a question in a slightly more unusual way. The question is this. It comes from Lisa Gowen 2 days ago, and as I said, episode 9. Can you talk about the practical process of getting words down? How do you write notes and ideas down? Are you a notebook notebook and pen, or a tech fan? I found it easy to overcomplicate this by trying different writing programs like Scrivener. I end up not writing anything, so now I just use a basic program that syncs across devices. So thank you for the question, Lisa. And the issue with that question is this, is I'm not the best person to answer it, pardon me. And the reason I'm not the best person to answer it is I think because of what I do, I referred to my day job a moment ago, I think it's because of my day job. When you're a barrister, you keep a huge amount of information in your head, because remember, you're standing up to cross-examine, and it could be in a 2 or 3 month trial, and you've got to stand up and cross-examine. You can't say, when you get an answer that's going to lead to something helpful, you can't say, oh, hang on, I've just got to go and look through these few thousand pages of statements here and get the next question, or get the piece of information that will allow me to run the next question. So it's natural. I've done that job for 20 years, and it's in that 20 years, you become very, very, very used to and very comfortable with keeping masses of information in your head. And so the answer is that for me, I couldn't write any way other than with all the information in my head. I have a weakness on names. I don't remember names very well, so I always have a page of names. And that could either be the names of people or of towns or locations, and that is literally it. Nothing else ever goes on paper. And so I'm not the person to answer the question that you've asked, unfortunately, because I imagine that's relatively unusual. And again, may not be right or wrong, and everyone is different. But what I did, Lisa, was I asked around. I contacted a number of other writers who have been very, very kind and have come back and have all given us answers. So what I thought we'd do today is read through those answers and let you know who they come from, and basically demonstrate to you that the answer to your question is that there is no answer to your question. Because you'll see from what's about to come that everybody is different. I do keep saying it. What I'm telling you about how I write is not necessarily how you should try and write. I'm not trying to teach anyone anything with this. I just thought it'd be an interesting diversion. And you will see now when I read these out that there really is no right answer. But hopefully one of them will ring a bell for you, and one of them might be helpful. Because when I say there's no right answer in the sense that no one particular approach is the correct one, it doesn't mean that there's not one approach that's the correct one for you. And so therefore, listen to these and we'll see where it takes us. The first answer comes from Neil Lancaster. Now, Neil is an author and former police officer. He writes the Tom Novak series. Going Rogue and Going Dark are the first 2 books in the series. And Neil says this: I'm very much the same as you, i.e. me. Microsoft Word, a notebook. I rarely write anything in the notebook. Possibly why I now have the Devil's Edit from Hell to complete, which is, so I'm a bad example to follow. Well, Neil, you're not a bad example to follow. As we say, everyone's different. Ed James, you may know Ed James. Ed James writes a number of series. Ed, I would hope, has lots to offer on this, because Ed writes more series and more books than anyone I've ever met in my entire life. But it's just bewildering to get your head around how he manages to do this. I just don't understand it. But Ed writes the D.I. Fenchurch series. He also writes the Scott Cullen series, and he writes the Craig Hunter series. So that just a slight indication there of just how much he does. And I believe his most recent book is Tell Me Lies, which is sitting on my nightstand and is about to be read. And I'm not sure if I'm right, but I think that's another series. So Ed, yeah, might be a very, very good person to help you with this. And Ed says, I do loads of this. Mind maps, flow diagrams, spreadsheets for names, one per letter of the alphabet, etc. I mean, it's a short answer, but there's so much in that answer, because to compare that to Neil, it's completely different approaches. And yet, as we say, neither one is right and neither one is wrong. It's what's right or wrong for you. Rebecca Bradley very helpfully got involved, and Rebecca writes the D.I. Hannah Robbins series, which started with Shallow Waters. 6 of them so far go through to a Deeper Song, I believe it is the most recent. Again, Rebecca Bradley is another ex-cop. You might notice a little pattern going on here. Rebecca says, I write a plan in Word. I also use a notebook alongside it to complement what I'm doing. I tried Scrivener, so the program you referred to, and I couldn't get on with it. I think it's brilliant for being able to easily move chapters around, but I like writing in one smooth document. It just feels better for me. So again, sort of a view that's somewhere in between Neil and Ed. And yeah, we are really seeing, aren't we? There is no right answer. Next, Susi Holiday. Susi writes a, not a series, I don't believe, writes standalone books. She's a number of books now, 5 or 6. I think she started with Blackwood and then other books such as The Lingering. Her most recent book was Violet, which is one that I think came out at the end of last year or the beginning of this year, one or the other. However, got some incredible reviews. The reviews for Violet were basically very, very dark. Kind of, they said talented Mr. Ripley meets single white female, I think was the most catchy of the reviews that I saw. And I've not read it yet. I need to rectify that. What Susi says, when I first have an idea, I email some notes to myself. Then I keep replying to that email with more notes, using a subject header that is a work in progress title that sums up the idea. When I think I have enough, it could be days or weeks or months depending on the idea, I then usually get out my trusty A4 notepad that I use for this process. I write a synopsis, or a rough outline as a brain dump. Then I aim for some character names and a very brief info. Then I go back to the computer and start a more formal outline, either in Word or Excel, using Word as chapter by chapter notes. Then I start writing. The outline and many things evolve as I go, but I need this process to make the words flow, especially as I have a busy day job and need to be word efficient when in writing mode. Often the email notes don't really get glanced at, but by writing them in, they embed in my brain. This all sounds very efficient, I have to say, and though it helps, I often still sit in front of a blank page wondering how to start writing for the first sentence or paragraph to come to me. But at least in my plan, I have something to try and keep going with. Now that answer, I have to say, is basically a creative writing course, isn't it, in one go? I mean, Susi's told you an amazing amount of information about how, if you are that way inclined, you could go about writing. And frankly, I think she should be doing this show rather than me, because I read that with some awe as to how somebody could be quite so efficient. And yeah, she said it sounds efficient. It really does sound efficient, Susi. Amazing. But I guess when you look at the reviews for Susi's books, it proves that there is some real value in that. Next we have Mason Cross. Hopefully you'll have seen my previous broadcast about Mason Cross, which was Tony Kent Writes and Recommends. Mason Cross writes the Carter Blake series, which I've raved about. He also wrote What She Saw Last Night, a very big departure from that, but still an exceptional book. A very, very talented man, worth listening to. And he says, all you need is Word. Actually, at its most basic, all you need is a pen and paper. I do like to keep track of chapters with a spreadsheet, but that's more for the edit stage when I need to make sure the timeline works. And I make day-to-day notes in Keep. Now, that's much closer to how I work, still a bit more than I do in that way. And remember what I've said to you about Mason Cross's books in the past, they're exceptional. So you've got Susi's books, so just one after the other there, just those two, if we look at them. You've got Susi giving you one comprehensive piece of advice as to her approach, and then Mason, who is a writer of equal stature, equal ability, completely different. It really is a proof of what I keep saying. There's no right or wrong answer. Neil Broadfoot. We spoke about Neil again in Tony Kent Writes and Recommends, the very first one. Another great author of my kinds of thrillers. Neil writes the Doug McGregor thrillers, the three Doug McGregor thrillers, pardon me, that began with Falling Fast and then moved on to one of my favourite series at the moment, which is the Conor Fraser series. And Neil tells us this: my iPhone is packed with notes, fragments and observations that I picked up during the day when we were allowed out. I got a computer plastered with post-it notes for names and character relationships. I don't plan, I just go with the story, and I hope. But as for getting words down, I try to follow the Stephen King rule of 2,000 words a day and write every day when drafting. This invariably spikes when I'm getting to the end though, and I hope that helps. What we're not going to go into now is the sub-conversation that followed that from Neil, where a lot of people were questioning 2,000 words a day, how the hell do you manage that? And it's a very interesting thing I've spoken about before, and we'll come back to in more detail, word count. 2,000 words a day, I have to say for me, that isn't actually, that's not a lot. But then I don't write every day the way Neil does, and I have a tendency to just, when I sit down to write, I just don't leave until it's time to fall asleep. So I think we all approach this in a different way. 2,000 words a day to some people is a huge amount because they are putting down sort of a solid number of words in a certain amount of time. To others, it's not as much as it sounds because those words will all need to be changed later on. And again, there's no right or wrong about that. But I'm not going to get too distracted by that. Let's move forward. Roz Watkins also contributed. She writes the D.I. Meg Dalton series, which began with The Devil's Dice. They're set in Derbyshire, around that area. I think Dead Man's Daughter was the next one. And her latest this year is Cut to the Bone, all in the D.I. Meg Dalton series. And Roz says, I write loads of notes in A4 pads before and during drafting. Plus, I have a huge whiteboard on which I write some of the backstory and do plotting with post-it notes. Also various Word documents, charts of names, a synopsis, more notes and a kind of plan. So it's quite chaotic and ongoing. I tried Scrivener, but don't like doing it a first draft in it. So I might try again when I've done a first draft of the next one, as I like the idea of being able to move scenes around easily. Also a lot of thinking while walking the dog and doing other things, and I hope this helps. It does, so that's fantastic, Ross, thank you. And again, I hope that that's going slightly more towards Susi's way of doing things, but it seems slightly more chaotic than Susi, so again, it's so different. Paul Burston has volunteered some information. Now, Paul writes, again, a number of books. I think Paul's written 6 as well. I don't think there's any series within Paul's books, but again, very dark psychological work. His first was, I think his first was The Closer I Get, no, his most recent, pardon me, was The Closer I Get, which is kind of a very dark harassment, stalkery sort of plot line in that book. I believe was nominated for the Not the Booker Prize in The Guardian last year. So those of us who will never be ever nominated for the Booker Prize all have a huge amount of respect for the Not the Booker Prize, and Paul was shortlisted in fact for that last year. I think his first book was in fact The Black Path. Paul, if I'm wrong about that, I'm sorry, but Paul Burston, do look him up. Again, very, very good writer. And he tells us I make lots of notes on my iPhone, often when I'm out walking. Sometimes I even draft chapters. Then I email them to myself and rework them in Pages on my laptop. I rarely use a notebook and pen, but I do sometimes use a storyboard with post-it notes. So again, somewhere in between. Michael J Malone, who wrote Blood, Tears, Suitable Eye, House of Spines, and After He Died, Michael said the following: thinking time is crucial. When I'm in the throes of a book, it's never far from my mind. I agree with that entirely, and that's the one thing. I don't make notes, as I say, of my own, but I am always thinking. And key to me is remembering to write down the thoughts that come to me in these times. That's where we diverge. So that's probably why his books are undoubtedly more successful than mine. Something I could do better at. I've been in the gym, scrambling about for a pen and a bit of paper towel to write something down. I still struggle with using the tech, to be honest. I find wee notes in my iPad and phone months after I finish the thing, and I catch myself going, oh yeah. Other than that, I don't plan at all, but I track each chapter in a notebook, main events, characters, etc., so that when I get lost, as is inevitable, I can look at my notebook for a reminder rather than reading through the whole text. So again, yeah, that's similar sort of thing that we're seeing to people in the middle ground. I think, it's not as bad as me in terms of no notes, but not as efficient or as comprehensive as Susi Holiday. So next, Erin Kelly. Now, Erin Kelly wrote, you'll all have heard, Broadchurch, the novel, the incredibly successful He Said, She Said. Also, other books include Stone Mothers and The Ties That Bind, and again, an author that you need to look up, you really do. And Erin's very helpful in regard to the question you asked, Lisa, because she said, I resisted Scrivener for years, so she's very specific, but it was so worth the 3 intensive days it took me to finally get my head around it. I don't plot before I start. I write in scenes that I find interesting and then see where the story takes me. So this means lots of switching chapters around to get things in the right order. Scrivener is the closest thing you'll get to an on-screen representation of how a book is laid out in a writer's head. It's invaluable for helping me keep track of different viewpoints and timelines. You can colour code them so you know at a glance how your book will filter readers. You probably don't need it if you're the kind of writer who can plot your novel in Excel before you begin. But if you're a feel-your-way writer like me, then I really advise giving it a go. That said, it's not great for the final polish. The fine-tuning facilities on Scrivener are clunky. I always do the last few drafts in Word. Apart from anything else, I don't know any agents or publishers who would accept a manuscript in Scrivener form. The last part there is obviously incredibly important to anyone who's aspiring to be a writer. And I have to say, Erin, I might give it a go. I mean, this is maybe a complete waste of time, especially with colour coding. I can't see any colours at all. I'm completely colourblind. But I might give this a go now. That was very persuasive. So I might, it's really helpful. I might, as I say. Next, Lisa Gray. Now, Lisa, 2 books, Thin Air, Bad Memory, both in the Jessica Shaw series. Jessica Shaw, private investigator based in America. Lisa, I believe, is from Scotland, so not from America, but in the classic Lee Child sense, has had the good sense to set her series on the broader canvas of America. And Lisa said, I am similar to Susi. I email myself book ideas, plot twists and lines of dialogue that come to me when I'm out and about. When starting a new book, I do a detailed outline in Word. I need to know how it ends before I can start writing it. For individual chapter outlines, it's good old-fashioned notebook and pen. I've always been a stationary geek and I find the blank page of a notepad far less intimidating than staring at a blank screen. I also use colour-coded post-it notes for different characters' points of view. For the manuscript itself, I only write in Word. Anything else is unnecessarily complicated. Again, very, very helpful, very, very different. It's, yeah, I hope one of these, at least one of these, is helpful to you. And then finally, we have Steven Dunne, who writes the D.I. Brooks series, which includes Death Do Us Part and A Killing Moon. And Steven says, I keep it all in my head. So great, we've ended where we began. It's much simpler that way because I can forget all the ideas I've had and only remember the standout thoughts. Also saves a lot of work. This probably explains my slow process and my excruciating lack of success. Hardly, Stephen, certainly in terms of the last one. I don't know how long it takes you to write, but certainly in terms of the last one. But no, that's very helpful, and again, brings us full circle back to where we began with myself and with Neil Lancaster. Effectively, there is no right answer, but one of these answers hopefully is right for you. So Lisa, a long one today, but I think unavoidably. I'm going to try to start doing these once a week because I've really enjoyed doing this. Not because it prevents me from, or it means I don't have to just talk blindly at the camera, because frankly I've got no juries at the moment and this is my outlet for that, but because I quite like having the input from other authors, and I'm sure you do too, because as we say, while there's no right answer, I'm sure that one of these answers is right for you. So people could just keep asking questions, anything you like within reason, and hopefully we'll be able to have a process where at least once a week we get to answer them properly. Okay. Thanks very much. I'll be back tomorrow to talk about what I managed to write today. Okay, bye.